Hey, my name is Alex Hengstifer, and I work at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And we're here today with a graduate student, Rials Christensen. And so what I wanted to kind of do is do a little interview. I know a lot of students and teachers and parents are really interested to see how scientists got to where they are, since most of us have a pretty winding path. What you see on your screen right now is a really awesome visual that Rials made, kind of just visualizing what her path looks like. And so we'll kind of touch on each one of these milestones along the way. But I would like to throw it over right now to Rials so she can kind of give a brief introduction of herself.
Hi, Alex. Thank you. I'm Rials Christensen. I am a PhD student at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego, California.
Awesome. Okay, well, so let's get started with some questions. So where did you grow up?
I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, and what inspired you as a child, whether it be hobbies or people?
So being from Salt Lake, I grew up underneath the Wasatch Mountains. So I grew up as like a really outdoorsy kid, and I was always covered in mud and was very into Girl Scouts and camping. I had an obsession with the movie Fern Gully and Lion King, so I loved animals and nature. And growing up, I had this idea to be an ocean vet, so that kind of translated to marine biologist, but also I wanted to be a vet for like the ocean in general, so that definitely kind of shaped my path from a pretty young age.
Yeah, Lion King was also one of my favorites. And so was there any like triggering events that you had like that stand out in your mind that kind of made you say like, aha, like this is what I want to do, whether it be ocean vet or marine biologist?
It was definitely, I think, still branching from that love of animals. And I remember hearing the terms of like climate change and stuff when I was younger. And I remember being like very kind of upset by that. And so I knew whatever I wanted to do, I wanted it to be in that realm where it was kind of helping the planet, I guess. So I was a little bit of a hippie kid, I suppose.
So in terms of school, when you were back in, K through 12, what were your favorite subjects?
I started out loving all subjects like in elementary school, and then I remember getting older and having a few not so great teachers that made it a little harder to love some of the math and sciences, but then found my groove again in high school, and I really loved biology and environmental science and European history, actually. But I do think that was, again, because I had a really fantastic teacher who was able to make it fun. But yeah, I think I stuck with those science classes because I knew that that would help me get where I wanted to go in terms of a career path, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I think that sometimes your least favorite classes can inspire you. So what were your least favorite classes, if you had any? I mean, I always try to chalk things up to the positives, but
Oof. No, I had a trigonometry class that was the bane of my existence. I didn't understand it the way that it was being presented to me. I was miserable doing the homework. I put it off. And I remember the day that I finished that class honestly felt like graduation almost. Like it was just such a feat to finish it, but I got through.
that's awesome. Yeah, I think we've all had that generalized experience of excitement. So as you were in high school, when you started to look at colleges, what was your major motivation? Did you stick with applying for marine biology, or did you broaden your scope at that point?
I think at that point I'd broadened it more to doing environmental science. And actually I'd applied to do early decision to Virginia Tech, and they did environmental engineering. I had family that went there. So that was actually the only school that I initially applied to. Got in, had like my honors dorm assignment, all this stuff. And then just honestly, financially, it was hard. Like college is hard for people to pay for. And my family, we just talked it out, and there wasn't really a feasible way forward there. So I ended up applying to University of Utah, so my local state school, just like a month or two before college was supposed to start. And that was a pretty hard decision because I felt like I'd been gearing up towards this big move and doing something. And then So changing that and having that huge pivot point was difficult. But yes, then I started at University of Utah in 2010.
Yeah, I think financial issues and considerations definitely are a driving factor for a lot of people, and it's important to consider. And so when you were at school at the University of Utah, what did you end up studying there?
I started in just like the strict biology path, and that wasn't great for me actually because so many of those courses were geared towards funneling people into the pre-med program. So like the kind of basic biology courses were fine, but anything after that, and it seemed very much geared towards physiology and human anatomy, and those just weren't super interesting to me. So I actually feel like I kind of wandered aimlessly for maybe a year and a half, 2 years, just taking a bunch of different courses. I think the weirdest one I took was probably an acting course. So that was something different, but definitely not for me. But then eventually I found the geology department, the College of Mines and Earth Science. And then that was just like this amazing, perfect fit. And I really feel like I found my stride there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about the College of Mines. So you landed in a great place.
Definitely.
And so what's a degree in terms of your undergraduate degree did you end up actually earning?
So it was a geology degree with an environmental geoscience emphasis, and then a atmospheric minor, kind of for fun.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. It's cool to be able to take a lot of different classes in undergrad. And so it's kind of like the beginning of your career in a way. And so it's really cool to branch out and then see where you land. So after you graduated, I see on your visual here, you landed at the United States Geological Survey, the USGS. So how did that happen? Did you apply for internships when you were in college, or was it when you were done?
So that actually came about in a pretty fun way. So for geology, once you finish your classes, and actually after you walk at graduation, typically you go do geology field camp. So it's kind of like the comprehensive final where you're out camping for 6 to 8 weeks using all of the experience drawing upon all these different classes you've had throughout the whole career of your time in undergrad, and you're out there field mapping and just hanging out outside all day and living in a tent. And I absolutely loved it, didn't want to come home. So after that was finished, my professor for that course nominated me for this internship that was a collaborative internship between the National Association of Geoscience Teachers and the U.S. Geological Survey. And working for the USGS is definitely something that I think like any geology student would be excited to do. So I put off applying for grad school just to see if I could get this internship. And then I got it, and I was placed in the Reston, Virginia office. And then I started that in summer of 2016.
Such a great opportunity, and I've heard a lot about that field camp, and that sounds pretty awesome. So, and I think that's good. It's you either love it or it is probably not the best experience. And so you ended up there. So you did get to move to Virginia then, right? So you went to Reston, Virginia.
Yeah, it was kind of funny how that worked out to like end up in Virginia. And this was initially just supposed to be a 3-month-long internship working on a paleoclimate project. And this was my first time hearing a lot about paleoclimate. It just wasn't something that too many of my classes had touched on before. So it was completely new experience, but it was so much fun. I worked with the best people. It was pretty much an all-female science team. It had a lot of fieldwork components and doing things I'd never done before. And my boss became like my mentor and my friend. And what was initially just a 3-month-long internship was extended to 5 months, and then they hired me on as a independent contractor for a year and a half.
And so did that give you the opportunity to figure out kind of what you wanted to do when you were looking forward to graduate school?
Yeah, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So kind of talking to a lot of the scientists that I worked with and seeing the path that they had followed gave me, I think, more confidence that grad school was probably the route for me. And yeah, I was able to start looking into different programs, and I really loved the project that I was working on, specifically paleoclimate work and using marine microfossils within that. So that's pretty much what led me to research Scripps and start digging through the faculty profiles and their research, and ultimately allowed me to decide that that's where I wanted to apply.
So for some of our students who may not know, can you just give a brief description of both what is paleoclimate and also what are these awesome marine microfossils that you study?
Ooh, foraminifera, they're the best. So paleoclimate work is just looking at how Earth's climate has changed throughout time, and then the different dynamic factors that influence that or are influenced by that. And one of the tools that we use to study these past climates are marine microfossils. So specifically what I work on are foraminifera, so these single-celled protists who have been in our oceans going back hundreds of millions of years, and so they have a really rich history that we can look at in these sediment cores that we drill up. So actually one of the photos on here is from when I was an intern at the USGS, and I actually was able to work at this sediment drill site. So we drilled down this section, and you pull up this long skinny tube of sediment, and then we go through and we sample it, and we look at it under a microscope, and from the different organisms that live in it, we can tell a lot about the environment. We can look at the changes in these organisms over time and see what things have influenced that, and also can just figure out some general things about what the like sea surface temperature was and general climate was behaving like back then.
Yes, yeah, looking in the past really gives us clues as to what can happen in the future and also what's going on today. That's great.
Yes, absolutely.
So at Scripps, where did you land? What kind of lab are you in now?
So I work in Dick Norris's lab, which is where Alex was as well. So I am still working on foraminifera, and something that is kind of neat is I was able to take some of these samples from that very same USGS drill site that I first started at, and I'm doing my thesis work on them now. So looking at a few times in Earth's past where the climate change is a useful analog to understand what's happening now, and gives us the ability to kind of ground truth these models that we have for predicting our future, which is obviously very important given the current anthropogenic climate change we're facing now.
And so in terms of modeling, is that something you started to do when you were in undergraduate, or is that a brand new skill you've been acquiring while you were here at Scripps?
Brand new skill, something I'm still working on understanding. Everything's a lot more complicated than I thought it was, and I think that's pretty much anyone's experience as they go through undergraduate or graduate school. Is nothing's very clear cut, but that means that there's kind of a niche anywhere for anyone to get expertise. So currently working on doing that.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is really, really important. So what do you think is next? So I guess maybe the first question is how soon do you graduate, and what do you think you'll do in the future? Are you interested in academia, industry, teaching?
Well, when do I graduate? That's definitely what all my family is asking me. So I'm about halfway through my program. I got my master's last summer. So I think I probably have about 2.5, 3 more years of work. So yeah, currently still just doing a lot of microscope work, trying to pull out these little marine critters out of these sediments and identify them. And then once I have that data set together, I'll be able to kind of look comprehensively at these changes through time, and then hopefully get to that modeling component I'd like to work on. And then after that, I honestly don't really have too great of an idea. I loved working at the USGS. I would potentially love to work for them again in the future. I've also really enjoyed TAing. Teaching is definitely a passion I picked up since I've been in grad school, as well as outreach and communication. I think that's a really important frontier that scientists should tackle if they feel comfortable doing so. And communicating our findings to the public definitely helps build public trust and bridge that gulf that sometimes the public sees between them and scientists, and I think ultimately allows us to do better science. So anything that would hopefully incorporate all of those things, but if I could find just a research project that I was passionate about, I'd be happy to continue in a postdoc. Yeah, so really a lot of different options, and I'll kind of just go with it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's something that is really good to point out too, is that when you are kind of moving through getting your graduate degree and then into a career, being able to be flexible, both where you live and kind of what you feel like you may go into is actually really important. And I think it's really cool you highlighted that you're using things like modeling to predict things like future outcomes. And then you're also really passionate about outreach, which is awesome because if we can't communicate and help influence our communities, then that's really important facet that I think is also important to highlight. Um, so I guess maybe a fun question here is if you were to look back and tell yourself when you were somewhere between K through 12, if you could tell yourself anything, what would that be?
That's such a good question. I think I would tell myself to not stress out so much and really not define myself by my GPA. I think especially the farther you get into school, the harder it is for that to be a useful metric for your success, and to not be afraid to ask questions and ask for help when you need it. And that's why your professors are there. That's why your peers are there. I think I would tell myself to not try and just like slug at it alone as much.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that that's as you get older, I think you start to look back and realize that you could have been a lot kinder to yourself. um,
Definitely.
and I guess in the same vein, I guess right now something that I kind of neglected to say is that we're both in our homes right now because we're still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So right now it's June of 2020, and so I know that you've been working on at home with your microscope, which is really awesome. As and I guess I guess to stick with the question is, so in light of everything that's going on today, if you could tell our students, our K through 12, even undergraduate students, one thing, what do you think that would be?
I think honestly it would be to prioritize your mental health and emotional needs. It's not going to do you any good to just stress yourself out to the point where you're unable to get any work done or you just feel awful. I think that definitely being flexible with yourself and just being able to do what you can and then be okay with that. I think that's been a really big lesson for me throughout all of this. So just kind of give yourself a bit of a break, really.
Okay, so I think if there's anything else that I missed, anything else you want to kind of add or throw out there for our students?
I don't think so. I really liked what you said about being flexible because I think that is a big deal. And I think that if I'd been even a little bit more flexible, especially in undergrad and starting out, going to a completely different school than I wanted to, I think I was a little rigid in that, and I didn't land on my feet as gracefully as I probably could have. And circumstances are going to change, and stuff's going to happen, and things aren't going to be like what you think they'll be. So just being flexible is like probably the best attribute you can have right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to kind of end on. I feel like anytime I have even a slight idea that I have everything together, something explodes and it all falls apart, or some facet of it falls apart. So yeah, that flexibility and resilience. And I just wanted to say, I think you're doing amazing things. And I'm so glad that you were willing to be interviewed. And I think you'll be very inspiring for lots of students and their parents too.
Oh, well, Alex, thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye, everybody.